Tutorials. And in today's tutorial, number 7, we're going to look at Google Form Basics Part 2. And this is again Part 2 of the Google Forms Pentology. Here's the outline and what we'll be looking at today. Essentially, we're going to be looking at all the other question types that you can add to Google Forms. So let's get started. I'm going to start us off by actually going to the forms from within inside Google Slides. If I go to File and then New, I can actually pick Form. So I don't have to go to forms.google.com as I showed last time. I can be in Google Docs or Google Slides or Google Sheets or even my Google Drive, and I can create it right from here. So this is kind of a convenient way to do it. New and then Forms. So I click on that and my forms will open up. I've got a brand new form here. I'm going to start off by giving this a name, and I'm going to call this Google Forms Basics Part 2. Once I've typed it in, just like with most Google products, I can then click up on the title and it'll pop that in for me. Great, that's all done. And I'm going to dive right in with Dropdown. So Dropdown is one of the questions that we can do, and I'm going to pull that up and click on Dropdown. So a Dropdown is just like a multiple choice where you can only choose one particular item from a list. But in a Dropdown question, instead of having this long list of options, you just have a drop-down menu. So I could do it like this. My question could be, what is your favorite sport? And go into option 1. I'm going to put hockey, volleyball, football, badminton, and we'll go soccer. Great. So there's my drop-down. Now, I'm going to copy this question and I'm going to make this into a multiple choice just so you can see the difference. I'm going to click on the eyeball, and here are my two forms, or my two questions. So here it is specifically in the multiple choice, and here it is as a drop-down. So you can see this compacts it much more. In this kind of a thing, if I had a whole bunch of answers, I would have to scroll a fair bit. And my form could get pretty long. Whereas this way, it makes it nice and compact. Now, I'm going to show you one of those awesome little features that can save you a ton of time. I'm going to delete this, and I'm going to get rid of all of these questions just by clicking on the X, and I'm going to go back to here. So let's say I'm starting from scratch. Well, what if I have a list already of my drop-down? Maybe I'm asking, something about my students that I've asked many times before. Maybe I want to know what favorite book they have, what's their favorite book, and I've got a list of books. I don't have to type them all in here option after option. Instead, if I already have these listed, I can go into, for example, a Google Sheet like this, highlight all of the stuff that I want. So in this case, I'm getting all of the schools. This is a file I often use when I'm getting a listing of the schools. I'm going to copy that. I'm hitting Control-C. You can go right-click and copy if you wish. I just prefer Control-C because I find it's a lot easier to use. I'm going to go into my form again in option 1, and I'm just going to Control-V, which is paste, and it pops them all in. I could, again, go right-click, and I could choose paste as well once I'm in there. So I'll just undo that to show you how that will work. I can click in here and right-click and hit paste, and they're all popped in there. That's amazing. What an incredible time saver. Because now if I go and look at the eyeball, I now have this nice drop-down. And more to the point, if I were to go back here and copy this guy and then make it a multiple choice, so now I've got a drop-down question and a multiple choice question, I can see what a difference it will make. This is my drop-down, nice and neat and tidy, and this is my list of schools. Got a lot of scrolling to go if I need to find a specific school. So if you've got a long set of answers, possible answers for a multiple choice question, a drop-down is a really good option. And I'm going to delete this because we don't need that. So there's my drop-down. The next one is a linear scale. And linear scales are really, really useful. I'm going to pull this up and hit linear scale. And I'm going to start off with a question you might have in a class. You might use as a survey feedback, an exit slip, something like that. So I'm going to call this question, and I'm taking this from an authentic relationships feedback form. Do you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, feelings, and perspectives in this class? So there we have the question. And I can have this from 1 or 0 to 2 all the way to 10. And I put labels in here, a label for the first one and a label for the last one. So I can put in here rarely, and I can put in here always. And so now when I click the eyeball, my scale looks like this. Do you feel comfortable? I've got rarely, and I've got always. And I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I can select one of these. Now, you might not want to have 5. No problem. I'm going to change that to 3. So now the scale will go from 1 to 3. And when I click on this, I now have a nice scale of 1 to 3. Rarely, always, and then sort of middling. So you can adjust this as you like. You can make it all the way to 10, although though that gets a little bit crazy, you might want that for a specific form that you have in mind. So I'm going to keep this at a nice 3. So that's linear scale. Now, what happens though if you have, I'm going to copy this and I'm going to go to 5. Let's say I wanted this to be 1 to 5. When I look at this at 1 to 5, there's a lot of stuff going on there. And by the time I start off here with rarely and I get all the way to always, I might, what does that mean? And what does that mean? And that I can figure out as neutral, but it's a little bit vague at this point. It would work for many people, but some people might struggle with that, particularly if the question is a little bit more difficult. So instead of a linear scale, I'm going to copy this. And, oh, you know what? I already copied it. Pardon me. I'm going to just, instead of a linear scale, I'm going to go to a multiple choice grid. Now, in a multiple choice grid, I can actually put my questions on the left-hand side, and I can have columns here on the right-hand side. So I'll show you how this looks. Now, when you're doing a multiple choice grid, you generally want to have a different question or sub-question on every row. And so what I'm going to say, I'm going to copy this here, and I'm going to put that there, just so you can see what it looks like. And I'm going to say here, I'm going to say, tell me about your feelings in this class. That is probably not a great question, but it will work for what we're doing here. So columns, I'm going to have rarely, sometimes, neutral, most often, and always. Maybe I'll change that to often. And so now, when I take a look at this, I've got a question over here. Do you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts, etc.? Over here, I've got the columns. I click on this, and I will now get the question over here, and then I have a heading on each individual answer. Great. So I'm going to go back here. I'm going to say, change this a little bit to see how you can use this. I feel comfortable sharing my thoughts, sharing my feelings, And then when I look at this, you can see that it makes 2 rows here, one for each question. You can keep these down to 1 question. If you really want to have those column titles, you can keep this down to 1 question. No problem with that at all. Or you can combine them into one long multiple choice grid. So that's a multiple choice grid. Really useful for some things. A couple of other things you can do that are fairly simple and quick. You can ask a date. So what date did you first attend this school? And choose date. Notice Google automatically chose date for me because I put the word date in there. I can choose date. I'm going to do another one here. What time do you get on the bus in the mornings? And click on time. So that allows me to put in a time. When I click here and look at this, we'll see it just gives me a date. I can put the date in like so, or I can pull this down, pick a date from the calendar that pops up. I can choose AM or PM, and I can put a time in here. So I go 6 and 15 AM, and so on. So it's just a nice way to format date and time when you want to do that. Now there is another thing that we can do that's sort of similar to this guy, and that is, instead of a multiple choice grid, it is a checkbox grid. So I'm going to make a new question down at the bottom. I'm going to pop it down to the bottom, and I'm going to make this a checkbox grid. Now the difference between checkbox and the grid up here, the multiple choice grid, is that checkbox you can have more than one answer per row. So I'm going to say, what toppings do you like? And here I'm going to have on pizza, and here I'm going to have on fries. Apparently it's lunchtime. And here I'm going to have on burgers. And column 1 I'm going to put here, we're going to have, let's say, cheese, ketchup, mustard, pickles, onions, definitely lunchtime, green peppers, green peppers, there we go. And when I go to look at this now, you'll see that I can have separate answers. I like cheese, and I like pickles, onions, and green peppers on pizza. Maybe I don't like pickles so much. On fries, I like ketchup. On burgers, I like cheese, ketchup, mustard, pickles, onions. So there we go. So that is a checkbox grid, as opposed to this, which is a multiple choice grid. One answer per row, multiple answers per row. So that gives us the last 2, I believe, different options for questions. There's a couple of other things you can do here that I'm just going to touch on before we end this video. And the first is you can upload an image. I can click on add a question here, and oops, sorry, it's not a question, my fault. I'll just get rid of that. I've got to click over here and add an image. So I click on add an image, and then I can go into my Google Drive, or you could upload. I'm going to click on that guy right there, and it's just going to put that image in there. I could also go into add image, and I could go into shared with me. I could go into upload from my computer. I can go into my Google Photos albums. I can take a picture with my camera, all sorts of options there. And all this does, there's no question, there's just a title, and it just gives you a place to put an image. A lot of times people use this, something like this, refer to this image for the next 4 questions, something like that. And then finally, there is video as well here. You can add a video. It is primarily from YouTube, but you can also go from a URL if you have a specific link that you want to use. But I can type in here student engagement, and I can do a search, and I can find student engagement. Sure, we'll grab that guy, and it puts a video in here, and I'm going to call this student engagement. And up here, I've already got my title there. I click on the view, and you can see there's my little image, and here is my student engagement. And when I click that, it will play right there inside the form. It's really, really, really nice. Very, very neat. So there you go. That is Google Forms Basics number 2. That takes us through all of the different question types and the video and image upload. The next episode we have is going to be talking all about how to change the overall look of the Google form and set up some settings so that you can actually send the form to somebody. So that's the next episode.